Awkward listeners. Today's episode is, well, to put it bluntly, it's about weed, marijuana, or cannabis, or rather the risk and management of the exposure surrounding this lit topic. I recently had the pleasure of speaking at the Gamma Iota Sigma 50th International Conference for college students entering the risk management and insurance industry, where our guest and I presented a topic to the students called "The Times Are A-Changin': How the Insurance Industry Adapts to Emerging Risks." Generally, we discuss the insurance industry has not always been, well, very flexible to emerging risks, and the industry hangs back and waits for enough data to expose the risk before it can begin to address it. And cannabis is one of those areas. And today we are talking to Kieran O'Rourke about his experience with the little green weed. Welcome, Kieran.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
We are so happy to have you here, and we're ready for you to bring all of your weed puns and everything that goes along with what you do. I have a quick question. Is weed a weed, or is it like a legitimate?
It's not a weed. It is not a weed. That was
not a weed.
Just another thing that it became known as.
I mean, really though, a weed is any plant that you don't want growing where it is, though, in fairness. Not to get too far off into a gardening or botany kind of lecture, but
since it's a plant that most people want and it's called weed. Anyways, so Kieran O'Rourke is a CIC from the National Alliance, has an extensive 35-year history in the insurance industry, and is currently the director of underwriting at Cannasure Insurance Services, which is a niche coverage market for the cannabis industry. So we are here to talk about everything you know about cannabis and the risk of cannabis. To start out with that, I have one question, and then I'm just going to let all the good details flow after that. What risks that you know of would an agent or an account manager be the least familiar with around cannabis in order to make a market like yours so largely relevant, other than, the obvious like fire and revenue loss, all that kind of stuff?
Well, I would say the product liability exposure is probably a bit complex. When you think about all the different ways that, I guess, the active ingredient can be delivered, ingested, used, abused, what have you, product liability is a little complex. You've got the traditional way that marijuana has been used, and that is by smoking it. These days, smoke is not always welcome in polite company, right? And so vaping has taken a bit of a share of the market, I'll say. And now, of course, there's all sorts of edibles. Everything from the traditional marijuana brownies, which predates history probably, to the ever popular gummy bears, to infused drinks, to they're even making some alcoholic drinks infused with THC. So I'm not exactly sure what the effect is there. I haven't product tested that one, but kind of an interesting twist, maybe a one-stop shopping kind of approach to all sorts of vices.
So you haven't product tested that one. Which one have you product tested?
Yeah, full disclosure, I was in high school in the late 70s. I was in college in the early 80s, and somewhere along the line, I missed the marijuana bus because I really wasn't into it back in my formative years, and quite frankly, I'm not a big practitioner of it these days as well. I begin and end as an insurance guy, and this just happens to be the space I'm in.
So you were speaking about product liability, and the first thing that came to mind is, especially since we just had Halloween and you hear all these horror stories about watch out that edibles are going to get in your kids' trick-or-treating basket. Of course, my first thought is always, nobody's going to give away their gummies, to little kids. But I saw in a news article, they were showing a picture of these THC gummies that actually, like, they were packaged. They did look just like Sour Patch Kids and Airheads. And all I could think of was, again, my underwriting brain came on and went, oh my gosh, how are they getting away with packaging it like that? I mean, but is that really a thing? Do you find that are there growers or dispensaries that really are marketing stuff like that?
Yeah, the industry has come a very, very long way. There was in the early days, and when I speak of the early days, it's probably a decade ago. As you know, the modern legalization movement started with Colorado and Washington, but of course, medical marijuana in California has been around, I believe, since the mid '90s, and so there were a lot of I guess you could deem them mistakes, perhaps, in the approach to packaging and what have you. The appealability of certain products to those that shouldn't be taking them were pretty quickly corrected, though. The industry has been just really, really good at making sure that products, edibles, have uniform dosage from one end of the candy bar to the other, and the packaging approach has been it's come a long way since the early days. There are adults that probably can't open some of the packaging that they produce. Now, once you get inside the package, there's only so many ways to make a candy bar. There's only so many ways to make a gummy bear. There's only so many ways to make some of these edibles. They have to appeal to the customer, number one. And if it happens to look similar to something that might be, something you pick up for your child or what have you, then that could very well be a problem somewhere down the line. Obviously, personal responsibility and parental guidance and all of that other stuff doesn't stop once the marijuana industry starts making edibles. So that continues, and of course that transcends everything, right? I mean, you don't send your kid down a steep hill on the first time they learn to ride a two-wheel bike. It is something that the industry is aware of, and the packaging though is top notch. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just again really surprised to see that was a thing, and also I just have to say I was really excited that we were going to be interviewing you today, not just because you bring such a unique expertise to the table, but because for me as a former underwriter and underwriter at heart, I'm just so excited to talk to somebody in that underwriting and product development arena. So of course, I just had whole lists of questions, but the packaging and product liability being a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with Cannasure, do you guys also work with the claims out of your organization?
Yeah, we received the first notice of loss at Cannasure.
Mm-hmm.
We are set up in an MGA style agreement with our carrier. The carrier in turn has reinsurance support for the program that's appropriately placed and highly rated reinsurers, the names of which you've heard.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we don't actually do is the claims. The carrier still adjusts the claims with staff adjusters and independents where needed. The other thing we don't do is actually arrange for the reinsurance. Although every year at the renewal, the Cannasure guys are there doing the dog and pony show for all the new arrivals in the reinsurance realm, as well as the ones that have been with us since the beginning. So the claim activity comes in,
Mm-hmm.
we forward it to the carrier, and they take it from there.
Now, let me ask you, with it being such this, it's a niche industry, emerging risk, with the agents that are typically writing these types of operations, are you finding that they are agents that are specific? I mean, obviously you're going to have some agencies that are trying to develop or gain a foothold in these, but do you have any mix of agents that it's like, hey, this risk just kind of came across me, I don't really know what to do with it? I mean, do you get a lot of those one-offs because it's such a unique thing? And if you do, what would you tell an agency that has never handled this kind of risk before? Like, what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, a very insightful question, because that's exactly what we have. Not for the most part, but we do get that. I'll start by saying that some of these operators, they've got the license, they are in it, but running a business and buying insurance for it, maybe it's new, and so they'll go to the person that they bought the home and auto coverage from, and that person will say, well, I'm not going to send this person away, I'm going to try to figure it out. They find us, and we're more than happy to hold their hand through the process. In fact, I did a webinar for Insurance Journal a year or so ago, and my topic was just that. How do we educate agents and brokers when they bring us this marijuana risk that just walked through my door and wants insurance? So we are used to that. We like it. My title might be underwriter, but I'm in sales. As I tell the crew all the time, if we don't sell something, we all go home, right? So definitely, it's in my best interest to to take that risk and to work with that new broker and try to put them at ease a little bit. One of the things, and I think it came out of my mouth at the September GIS that we had the panel for, but for the cannabis, but for the marijuana, it's a retail store. The only reason we call it a dispensary is because the term drugstore had already been taken. So, but for the cannabis, you've got a retail store. People walk in, they buy things, they walk out. Mm-hmm. These are the things that we will say to try to just put these things into perspective for that new broker. That, hey, this is a lot more normal than not normal when it comes to the exposures themselves, the insurance exposures. Try to look past the word marijuana. Try to look past the stigma that you may or may not have brought into this. These are manufacturing firms. These are people that grow things. Oh, I don't know, like where do we get anything? The people grow things all the time indoors. Greenhouses weren't invented when marijuana became legal, right? Mm-hmm. The extraction process for the oil wasn't invented when marijuana became legal. So this is part of the okay, calm down. This is really not as hard as it looks. We'll help you through this.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point. Yeah, it is a store, and these are businesses. So I'm thinking in my head, okay, we've got our dispensary, we've got the greenhouse and the grower, but again, I don't know what goes on behind the scenes between growing it and it getting to the retail shop. So what other kinds of business what types of businesses do you have programs for?
Well, we like to think that we've got something for everybody along the line. So if you think about, well, let me just use a term, seed to sale. There are all sorts of tracking software, tracking programs that states impose, and the term they use, seed to sale tracking. So seed to sale is this. You've got the growers, the cultivators. There's a number of different terms, but they all mean the same thing. It's the folks that grow the marijuana, and we will only insure the growing crop for an indoor grow, but we will do the liability for the outdoor grows as well. There are some purists, a lot of them are out west, that still grow outdoors. This is a very hardy plant, and so you've got people that are simply growing the marijuana, and sometimes they will take their own crop and they will extract oil, or they will trim it and sell it as flour. Many of the purists will take just that raw bud and they'll grind it up themselves. Other times the grower will they'll trim it and they'll dry it, and then they will crush it themselves and make pre-rolls, which that's what the cigarette manufacturers have been doing for centuries. Those are all pre-rolls, right? You can roll your own cigarettes, but mostly people buy a pack of cigarettes and they are all pre-rolled. So the industry is very good at making pre-rolls as well, but many times it's processed both ways. So what do you do with the oil? Well, the oil can go into a vaping device, and it can be consumed that way. Other times, the oil is infused into the edibles that we talked about a little bit ago. And so that middle ground is the processors and manufacturers of other products. And then the end of the whole cycle is simply the retailing of these goods to the public, whether it's medical marijuana or if it's adult use. In Ohio, here where I am, we just have medical marijuana. The law does not open it up to adult use or recreational use. A lot of us like to just use the term adult use. It sounds more grown up, I suppose. But in a state like Massachusetts, Nevada, Colorado, Washington, a number of them, they also, have stores that are simply go in and, buy the form of it is, of your choice.
So I have a question. If the processes and the product that comes along with cannabis are fairly similar to other processes and products that are mainstream or more well known, why was this market so hard to or so slow to develop?
Well, I think the main reason, and the main reason companies like Travelers and Liberty Mutual and Chubb and all the big stocks and what have you, one of the main reasons they are still on the sideline is because marijuana is still a Schedule One drug in the 1970 controlled substances list. Okay, it's right next to heroin,
You're
and you
right.
can
Even though it's
argue
legal in most states, you still got a
yes,
problem on the federal level.
you got a problem on the federal level, right? And the IRS, which is a agency of the federal government, still has its bugaboos, and they'll take the money, but they've got laws in the code that say if you're doing something, if your business includes contraband, you don't get to write off all your business expense like everybody else does, like the National Alliance does or anybody else, right? No, you pay the full, send us all your money type thing. They'll take the money, but they won't allow you to enjoy the write-offs, right? It's just the craziest thing. But as I said earlier, I'm an insurance guy, so don't ask me about the intricacies of states' rights. But this is a states' rights deal. The states have said, listen, we have certain rights as a state. We can do what we want. And the federal government was kind of like, should we care? I can imagine the Department of Justice, they're looking at each other like, what do we do? They're going to do it. What do we do? Well, the states went ahead and did it. And now, of course, it's a snowball rolling down the hill. It's way too big, way too fast, and it's producing way too much tax money. There's no turning back, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
Well, the reason it really it was just such a weird kind of birth is the federal illegality and the stigma. Again, in my humble opinion, there's still a pretty decent sized stigma out there in a lot of people. You can still rent Reefer Madness somewhere online, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's, with it, the marijuana being contraband, Dustin and I were having a conversation a few months ago, actually, because when you look at your typical property coverage forms, everything says contraband is excluded. So we were just kind of having this philosophical discussion. Well, it's technically contraband, but if you're in a state where it's legal, would a typical standard property form respond to that? Which is why, Cannasure comes in, because your property forms and coverage forms would already address that, I'm sure.
Yeah, we started out, obviously, well, maybe I ought to take a step back for the audience to understand that when Cannasure decided that they wanted to make that leap from a wholesale retail basis to a underwriting authority pen holding program, that's how I got together with Cannasure. They found me. They had a carrier willing to do this, but they didn't have any program. They didn't have any forms. All they knew was they wanted in. And so I landed Cannasure with a blank, slate, a big, gigantic conference room table with all of the various research that I forms and, what's going on now and who's doing it, and all the research material I needed. But I didn't have anything. I had to write it. I had to put it all put together. So, because my history is like 95% ISO, you kind of, when the going gets tough, you kind of run home to mama sometimes, right? And so, I started with ISO.
Start with your template and then white out the certain exclusions.
Exactly. That's precisely right. So you start with what you know, right? And you say, hey, I've got a 4-walled, manufacturing plant. Okay, got that. And then you work backwards from, okay, what about these forms won't allow this as they're written? And of course, you're obviously the word contraband does appear in the property forms, and so you need to get that taken care of. And then you got to say, well, wait a minute, we're going to be insuring growing plants. Okay, how do we do that? And what, for that matter, what about the goods in process and the completed stock? And so, well, what's the rest of the industry doing? And so you just you amass everything that you can comfortably do with the known forms via ISO or whomever, And then you basically fill in the gaps with things that you have manuscripted or borrowed. Give you a quick example. We offer at Cannasure, we offer a sublimit for professional liability. It's part of the products policy. And the whole intent there is that if you are, let's say you're a medical marijuana card holder and you go into the dispensary with your card that says, I can walk in here and buy stuff because I've got one of these really terrible ailments. And you say to the person behind the counter, hey, I got this going on. What do you think? Are you getting professional advice? You see what I'm saying? So we got to address this exposure. We have to offer something to the marketplace. And so we borrowed from ISO and we looked at the druggist professional form and we changed it accordingly to fit our needs. And so that's another technique that we would use, is to say, well, what comes close that's here? And can we wordsmith it so that it fits with everything else we're doing?
That's fascinating. Now, I always assumed that, and I don't know why I've thought about this, but I imagine when you're in the dispensary and some places call them the bud tender.
Yeah.
When they're giving advice, I always imagined it or equated it to like a wine sommelier. They're giving, their opinion on this product or that product. But do people that work in dispensaries require any kind of special pharmaceutical type training, just even being on the retail side?
Some states will say that you've got to have a pharmacist on staff.
Okay.
But by and large, the bud tender you're talking to is trained up in the nuances between the various strains, sativa, indica. Sometimes there's a hybrid between the two. They're trained up in, now again, who is the customer? Is the customer a medical marijuana card holder with ulcerative colitis or some other really, really horrible condition? For instance, in Ohio, there's 25 conditions now, and you wouldn't wish any one of them on anybody. When that person comes in, that's a different conversation than if one of us were to walk in as we are planning, that great weekend or something like that, and we want something to, experiment with or whatever. That's a very different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But in a medical marijuana situation, I think the basic advice, if you will, I don't want to say advice like, yeah, this is true advice, but the talk might be, hey, people with your condition have found a lot of relief with this or with that. And it's more of a consultative thing. One of the big misconceptions is that that they walk in with a prescription and they don't. In Ohio, if I have one of these, or if I think I have one of these conditions, I have to go to a referral doctor who looks at my chart and may or may not be my doctor, but they get access to my medical records and they say, yeah, this is you. Yeah, you qualify. The state then sends them a card, which only allows them to walk into the dispensary. Okay. So, it's not a prescription. It's not something that they're told, hey, you got to take this mix of, THC or this level of THC and you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking to those referral doctors, along the lines of professional liability, are there special programs for those actual referral doctors, or are they just relying on their standard office BOP and malpractice coverages for that?
Yeah, I think most of them are. It's a little bit out of the scope of my program. I will write the general liability for their 400 square feet of office space all day, really. But that's about as far as they go. How every state kind of treats that when it comes to the med mal and state licensing or what have you, I'm pretty sure that it's pretty much understood that, there will be these doctors that are simply going to say, yeah, you've got this or you've got that and approved for a medical marijuana card. I think that everything has to work in concert. You can't have one part of the state, government monstrosity saying heck no, when another side is saying heck yes, and so on.
Yeah. Now, we talked a little bit about too, like the stigma that surrounds just the industry as a whole. One of the things that I've noticed too is just a lot more use of you even hear the term cannabis used more often than marijuana these days. Is that by design? Is that just because the word marijuana itself already has connotations? I mean, what is the
Yeah, I think the professionals in this space prefer the word cannabis. Marijuana. There are a number of theories as to how the term marijuana came about, how it was originated,
Mhm.
and what have you. Some of it isn't all that pretty. I don't know enough about it to spout the nuances here. We can all look it up,
Now I'm
but
curious.
there are some that believe that it has a very pointed reason for sounding the way it does. I'll just leave
Mhm.
it at that. So, but cannabis is used almost exclusively among the professionals in this space.
Mhm. Now, do you find, I mean, so working with Canasure, and being in the arenas that you're in, again, very insurance, which is typically buttoned up industry, do you, and you've even said, you are not much of a partaker yourself. The culture within your company, is it in line with what you typically see within industries? Or, I mean, what is that Canasure culture like inside the offices?
I've been in the industry for 36 years, and but for the cannabis, you wouldn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Our office I mean, it's a beautiful office, but it's standard.
Mm-hmm.
The offices have the glass and the glass door, and this wall is an accent color, and that wall is an accent color. There isn't a marijuana leaf anywhere in the office. Our logo, the U in Cannasure, is got like a like a medical cross on it, or if you can make it out, but the colors are like bluish. Okay, so it's not even green.
Okay.
We're called Cannasure. Yeah, they've got the canna thing going on or whatever, but otherwise, it is we're an insurance firm. We're an insurance agency. All we do is cannabis, but you would walk in there and not really know if you could spend 5 minutes walking around and have no idea what we insure.
Hmm. Now, is there a sense of your company mission to do anything? I mean, do you guys feel a sense to do anything to help that stigma, to destigmatize it at all? Or, I mean,
Yeah,
I know it's a very vague question, but I guess I'm just trying to understand the mindset.
yeah, and I will try to answer that. I think I know what you're getting at. Look, there might be secondary, tertiary goals of the organization, but we want, at least on the program side of the house that I run, right? I can
Mhm.
speak for my own little world. We want to be great insurance practitioners in this space, and we're
Mhm.
we're no different than any place I've ever worked. We want to write as much good business as we can and as profitably as we can. Period. End of
Mhm.
sentence. Right. The advocacy
Mhm.
part, the hearts and minds mission is it's barely secondary, really. When I do talks, it's to the
Mhm.
CPCU Society of Columbus or the GIS. The friendly people of the National Alliance will call me up and say, "Can you come to Columbus?" Absolutely. But my goal is not advocacy. It's not to make sure that people's minds are changed.
Mhm.
As far as we will go, might be this. Early on, I was in Columbus talking to the CPCU Society at their monthly meeting, and it was interesting because at the time Ohio hadn't gone medical yet. They were talking about it. It had passed. They were forming it up, and I would say that half the group there was almost a little angry, like how dare you get into this space? This is horrible. And I said, look, I'm not here to argue the pros and
Mhm.
cons of whether this law should have been passed. I said, I will say this, that people are turning to marijuana, cannabis, THC because big pharma has failed them. And before this even became legal or potentially legal, they were partaking in the only substance that was giving them relief.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know the opinions being what they are, I wasn't there to argue with anybody, but I was there to say, listen, before you make your final decision on what's going on here and how you feel about it, understand that at least for the medical patients, this law is becoming a reality because it is necessary for these people to find a little bit of comfort and a little bit of relief from some chronic thing that they've got going on.
Yeah.
And, I had at the time, it was 22 ailments that qualified for a card. And I would say, this is the list. Okay. You don't see hangnail here. You don't see, I bit my tongue. You don't see my tooth hurts. You see some really rough stuff on this list. That's what we're talking about here. Yes, we're probably going to go to adult use one day, and you can have, a couple more debates, but this is where we are.
Now, for those states where the adult use is permitted, what kind of, and my brain's going back to now the product liability and the packaging and everything.
I thought you were going to say your brain is fried.
Well, I mean, we've talked about my ADHD in great detail, so there's that too. But so for the states where it is recreational use is legal, obviously it's going to be bigger exposures. I'm assuming you have different underwriting guidelines for what's going to be acceptable for your program. I mean, what kinds of things would agents need to be aware of in looking at what would make a risk eligible or what would knock a risk out of eligibility?
That was going to be one of my questions, is what does underwriting process look like at Cannasure? And
yep, this is it's what I do every day, right? Listen, the kind of the very fortunate thing about underwriting in this space is that the casualty exposure is hemmed in quite a bit by regulation. Okay, couple things at work here. Number one, it is all an open book. If you want to find out who's got licenses or whatever, it's on every state website. They've got it down to, just here's everything you need to know. And that was part of the sales pitch to the public was, look, this thing is going to be an open book. If you want to find out what's going on, it's all going to be there. And so regulation is really, it's very thick. Regulation is very, very tough. Give you an example. In the state of Ohio, for instance, the one I know best, the state regulators can log into any operator's camera system at any time and have a look. The state can log into your point of sale system at any time and have a look at real-time transactions going by. Okay. And this is the key, the most valuable thing any operator owns is the license. And so the last thing they're going to do is play fast and loose with the rules and risk losing their license. Okay. That doesn't mean that nobody's tried. They've tried. In fact, it was in the news just the other day. Somebody not in Ohio, but they had kind of skirted some of the testing mandates that the regulations had laid out, and they got in trouble, and they can have their license either taken away or suspended. Okay. So the casualty exposure is hemmed in quite a bit. Now, from an underwriting standpoint, what we have on our side is claims made, a claims made products form. What I chose to do was to split the premises GL and go straight ISO, occurrence, defense outside the limits, no deductible. But over here on the product liability, I've got a standalone products policy, small deductible, defense inside the limits, claims made. Okay, so from that standpoint, we're pretty good. I also have the one key exclusion is called the specified disease exclusion.
Okay.
And it basically says, look, don't come back with respiratory illnesses and your heart attack and whatever. We're selling you something that you can smoke. Okay. So, okay, got it. So, that's partially reality. The other thing is you've got to have reinsurance support on your program. And that's sometimes the price of admission is exclusions, right? And so while we do offer that broad, hey, it just happened, sudden and accidental type thing, the long-term stuff is not going to be part of the coverage. And it's claims made anyway, right? So from the underwriting standpoint, we are looking at, are you, if you're a dispensary, are you getting your product from qualified suppliers, and is all of this product accompanied with a certificate of analysis? Has it been tested? Are you making sure that your suppliers are testing? Are they including a certificate of analysis with every shipment to say it's been tested? Here's the test results. Here's the THC content. Here's everything. Okay. If you are a manufacturer, are you testing? Are you making sure that the levels of THC are within the state's guidelines and all that other stuff. That's really what you're underwriting is, the supplier and manufacturer and grower integrity. But I'll tell you one other little thing, and this is mostly anecdotal. This group of operators, now again, they're very risk tolerant, right? They're in the cannabis space. And I love it when I get an application and it says 25 years of experience. And it's like,
hasn't been legal for that long.
okay, I got you. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Love it, right? Okay, cool. So that's really what you're doing. You're underwriting the veracity of the suppliers and the supply chain, if you will, going in. Really, when we're looking at a dispensary in Ohio that's medical marijuana only, the product is the product. Just because it's medical doesn't mean that something can't happen. Same thing with adult use. Now, once again, in Ohio, we don't sell smokable marijuana for medical use. The powers that be here just thought that might have been just a little bit antithetical there. That, wait a minute, it's medical. Wait, smoke? No, yeah, it's going to be just edibles and transdermal. So, kind of an interesting twist there.
That actually makes sense. I mean, how far have we come from the days of cigarettes where doctors, what was it, 4 out of 5 doctors recommended a certain brand?
Yep.
And now we've got cannabis in the market, and I don't know, I guess I'd never thought about that. Smoking medical marijuana versus...
And that's not all states. Some states do allow it.
Right.
Again,
but the logic of not smoking it, but rather using an edible or a transdermal patch makes a lot more sense than smoking it, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now, what about the risks? So, like you said, I mean, there are THC infused drinks now, and I see we've got places here in Florida where, so in Florida is medical use only, but we have CBD bars, which have no supposedly minuscule amounts of THC. But I went to a bike shop the other day because they had a jazz band playing outside, and I was like, there was a farmer's market, and I just wandered in, and I don't drink beer. And so I was like, well, do you have some sparkling water for me? And the guy's like, well, we've got CBD water as well. So do you have any specific programs for just CBD type products that don't even get into THC, or what does that look like for you?
Well, the operative property form, the key property form in the program is called the Cannabis and Hemp Coverage Form. So back in 2017, when we were putting this all together, we could see the hemp thing on the horizon and the CBD thing and what have you. I'll tell you, it's a lot of times it's just, we'll look at the CBD thing as well. A lot of what I like to write, every underwriter's got their things they like and things they don't. When it comes to CBD only, without the drug, THC, I like the guys that are growing acres of hemp and producing CBD isolate or full broad spectrum CBD in bulk, and they're sending it to whomever to make whatever it is they want to make. Again, these are my underwriting likes and dislikes, if you will. I like to say to people, look, the closer you get to somebody's mouth or skin with these products, the less interested I'm going to be. So the stores that are selling all the little 2-ounce bottles of goo, they got them all lined up or whatever, probably not going to be that interested in it from an underwriting standpoint. Property and general liability, maybe. Product liability, maybe not.
I'm guessing there's less regulation if it's just the CBD, right?
Yeah. It's a lot less regulation, as the case may be, because the cannabis is so regulated. But the other thing you have to look at is the claims that some of the CBD guys will make. If the claims were true, I wouldn't have this hairline, right? I would look 20 years younger.
What's your best claim?
Some of the claims they're pretty wild.
Okay, we got to hear some interesting claims. This is the good stuff.
I mean, I'm saying that the things they say these products are gonna do for you. Everything from curing baldness to.
Well, I mean, Red Bull gives you wings.
Red Bull gives you wings. That's exactly right. I think the only claim I haven't seen in the CBD realm is something that would make you not want to buy blue pills. Okay. So other than that,
Yep. Okay. It's funny when when I teach personal and advertising injury, and a lot of times, especially newer agents and CSRs, don't really understand the nuances of personal and advertising injury. And the first people think of is like, well, faulty advertisements. And when we go over the exclusions, I always think about when I was a kid, and my mom owned a beauty salon, so we always had these trashy magazines coming over, and I remember all the ads. These pills will make your bust grow by 3 inches, and it's like, or these diet pills, or these are going to grow your hair, or remember the shoes that would tone your butts. Yeah, the insurance isn't covering that. Like, there's no that is specifically excluded. So if the product doesn't do what you say it's going to do, that's not covered. That's not what personal and advertising injury is for. But
Viagra was originally a heart pill.
That's true. And the stuff that I put on my eyelashes was initially for glaucoma. So, speaking of glaucoma, I guess that's also something that cannabis is used for.
Mhm.
But, speaking of claims, now going to claims from the insurance standpoint, any unique claims or, any dirt you can share?
Yeah, the most unique thing about the claims we've had to date is that there aren't that many.
Oh, wonderful.
And I guess is that just a humble brag I just did? Did I just say I'm the best writer in the whole space? I mean,
Yes.
no, not really. Let me just say that the number of claims is well below expectations.
Mhm.
Okay. So
Wow.
I can talk a little bit about some of the big ones. We had 2 fires that one of them was came out to be about $400,000. The other one was about $300,000. The one was a situation where we reproved the whole thing about a chain is as strong as its weakest link. There was some grow lights, and the chain link broke. The one light came down, hit the table. The table had a plastic liner to catch the water from watering the plants. Sparks, smoke, melted plastic, boom. All the plants were gone. Now, in that particular case, we did not insure the growing plants. They sure wish that they would have, because that was a big out for them. But we rebuilt a total of 2 grow rooms in that fire. We had another one happen at one of my favorite risks in Massachusetts. Same type of thing. It was more of a ballast that went bad instead of a broken chain. But then we had a break-in where the business income kind of added $150,000 to the claim. Other than that, we did get hurt pretty badly on that Memorial Day weekend in 2020 when all the riots were taking place. Our security that we demand for all of our risks are such that we want to be able to slow the crime down fast or slow enough to give the good guys time to get there. And of course, on that weekend, nobody was really showing up to help all that much. So that weekend cost us a bit. Otherwise, it's been very interesting what has been submitted. One claim was our payroll company scammed us out of $1 million. Yeah, I mean, I feel bad, but that is not an insurable event for our policy. I'm really sorry to hear that, but we had another one where they were moving their office from, I think it was from one floor to another, or maybe to another building. It doesn't matter. The movers dropped their copier and it tumbled down the steps. I've got a picture in the file of a copier at the bottom of the steps, all busted up and toner all over the place or whatever. And it was like, well, I hope your movers have insurance, because that thing was in their care, custody, and control when that happened. We've had a few others that just closed without payment just because they weren't covered. So really what it comes down to is break-ins and attempted break-ins, and 1 or 2 product claims where somebody had a bad reaction to something that they bought.
Wow.
It's been mostly the traditional insurance losses, right? Fire, vandalism, crime.
What did you say? If not for the
cannabis.
Cannabis?
But not for the cannabis. Yeah.
but for the cannabis.
But for the cannabis. So I wish I had something a little more salacious for you on these claims, but frankly, it's it's kind of neat. As an old underwriter, it's like, hey, the original peril of fire is number one on the list.
Yeah.
Undefeated. So
Right. Hey, that's where it all started.
that's where it all started.
Mhm.
Is right back when there was just one peril.
Yeah.
Kieran, it has been so much fun to talk to you today. This has been a smoking hot conversation.
Come on now, you can do better than that. There's a lot of things.
I think I got another one up my sleeve. But if somebody wanted to contact you, how could they do that?
Well, Cannasure.com. We are at Cannasure.com, and everybody's on there. My all my contact information, as well as all my colleagues.
And a quick question on that. Like, so how long is the appointment process for an agency? If they had a risk, could they get appointed in time to bind that particular risk, or?
Yeah, I think we're still pretty accommodating to that hot potato kind of thing where I got one. We have an appointment process that's a little more sophisticated than putting a thermometer under your tongue and seeing if it reads 98.6. But become an agent is on Cannasure.com. So
Wonderful.
all of that is out there. It's pretty straightforward, and we've got some other material out there as well. Cannasure has LinkedIn presence. It's got a Facebook presence. So we're hopefully pretty hard to miss.
And I'm hoping that plenty of agents are now excited to have a market now for that risk that they had no idea what to do with before.
Yeah, give us a call. We are open for business.
Kieran, you've provided some wonderful information. I don't think this is a puff piece at all. So with that, we will THC you later.
Yeah, well, I never got a chance to tell you how much the business is growing and how high the premiums are.
Oh,
Because it's a budding market for sure.
Oh yeah,
In high demand.
That's right.
As well.
I was about to say that joke, but you nipped it in the bud. So
Oh, I'm too slow for you guys. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the corny dad jokes.
this is what you should have studied up on. Is some of the
It is. I was just excited to talk to someone from commercial underwriting.
There you go. There you
That's
go.
awesome. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Kieran.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging around for another awkward conversation in insurance.
Stay tuned for new episodes from Awkward Insurance wherever you listen to your podcasts. And be sure to check out the National Alliance on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or at scic.com.
Now go forth and be awkward.
Toodles!
Doodles.